Hello everybody, my name is Greg Bennett and I'm the founder and owner of Tech Reviews Nope. And today I'm going to show you how to set up your iSpy, or known as iSpy Connect software. And what that is a security camera software system that is open source, free. It does have some paid stuff, but the paid stuff is mostly accessing your videos and your live recording, control over your cameras remotely. That's pretty much all that is. But for the most part, one of the biggest problems with open source software is if it's not popular, then it's a hard time getting any help, and worthwhile help that is. iSpy does have a forum, but the simple fact is I've even asked questions on there and I hardly got an answer, if one at all, at times. Sometimes they give me a good one, but for the most part I can't even get an answer on some of this stuff. And that's where I'm here. I'm here to help you out, get your stuff running, and that way you can do whatever you need to do. Now, one thing I want to mention is I highly advise you to ask your questions there on iSpy first. Then if you don't get an answer there, or get a half answer or something like that, come to me and I'll try to help you out as best I can. But keep in mind that I'm still trying to figure out some of this stuff, because again, it's open source and whatnot, and things change, especially with something like this. Now, why isn't this popular? It's not because it's bad. It's not because of anything like that. It's just that, how many people do you know with an actual security camera? You might have a camera for like a baby or something like that, but for the most part, no one, or at least not many. And I've been looking at security cameras for the past decade, just hadn't got around to it until recently. When I was forced to. But for the most part, not many people have security cameras in the first place. And some people who have security cameras, they got something like ADT or something like that, where yeah, they got something there, but it's not open source and it's not this. Not saying this and ADT is comparable, because ADT you only get like one camera or something like that. You get hardly anything, and with iSpy, it's a free open source. You can put in whatever amount of cameras you want, attach it to the software, and as long as your computer can basically deal with all the cameras, which is not a big problem. With mine, at least, it's you can pretty much run whatever you want. So let's jump on into this. Now, really quick, I want to mention I am going to block out some things for obvious reasons, but I'm going to try to help you as much as possible. Now, what's going to happen, by the way, this is on this is iSpy 64-bit, but version 5.9.3. So if you got a earlier version, then things might look slightly different. Later version too. But for the most part, you'll see something like this, and you won't see these windows, and this will be pushed all the way over. Now, what you're looking at is obviously your control area, a window to view things, and I got more than this, but this is just one I feel safe to show. And you got your video recordings here and your master control over all your cameras here. And that's pretty much it. So how do you add things? You can add microphones, you can add cameras and whatnot, but I'm going to focus on cameras for this video, and particularly IP cameras. I highly advise you to go through the IP camera wizard. The reason for it is if you go through the camera itself, you got to find a link, and you got to have the right link, and you could be missing out if you do FFmpeg or MPEG, sorry about that. But for the most part, if you know the links, or you know that you have some type of restriction, then you can put it there and whatnot. But let me show you how you do it over the wizard. So once you click on that, select your model. If you don't know your model, then go down here and put in whatever. But we're going to select a model. And then you put in your username, your password to your camera if you already have it set up. If you don't, you need to have it set up before you jump into this. And you need a static IP address for the camera and a port number. So basically, if you know the port number but not the IP address, just for example, just for sake, do that and scan locally, and what will happen is this will start. And give it a second or two. Let's just do that. And as you saw there, when I clicked that, something came up. But all that was internal. So let's go back for a second. This is a internal. So basically, you have internal IP address, the internal port, and so on. So let's see if these are valid. Now, I got a invalid IP address, so all these are going to say no, but basically this is the advantage of the wizard. You can click yes, and it scans it. Well, you don't got the answer that you want, so you can do scan for more. But since we got invalid, we're not going to deal with that. At worst case, you just have this, which is all my cameras. So, as far as this, you should be able to see something like this now. Now, if you see this icon, this means that the camera was once connected, but it's disconnected. And as you see here, just reconnected. But this is normal IP cameras. I found IP cameras, especially cheap ones, they disconnect all the time. It's not a 5-minute disconnect. It's usually like a second or two. Especially with outside cameras, if it's raining or whatnot, if it's very far away from the Wi-Fi source, then you might have a disconnect once in a while. It's not a big thing. But let's go and jump on into the editing. How do you edit it? Let's you can double click there and make it full screen. Let's do this number so I can show you stuff. You right click on the frame and you go down to edit, or you can go down here to edit, given that whatever model of iSpy you're using. So what you need to do first is actually name the camera. So as you see here, if you look at the top left of the camera, the timestamp, let's just put in that, and you can see it changes. So this is actually very important, because whatever this shows, this will show on the final video. So if you got a MP4 or whatever file they have it saving it as, whenever you hand it over to the cops or whatever, this will show. It's very important. And it's very important that you look at the timestamp and select the proper timestamp. So say, for example, if you want frames per second, that's fine, but now you don't know where it was taken, and you just go through. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. I suggest this bottom one where it shows the name, the date, and time, but it's up to you. Now, here's the thing, if you got a audio and whatnot, you can set that up. I personally haven't messed with that yet. I don't have the proper cameras to do that, so that's just one thing to keep in mind. So let's jump on to the motion detection system. So I highly advise to select the background modeling. If your camera moves, then it's going to select the 2 frames automatically, so you can leave it on 2 frames. But background modeling is pretty good. If you got a static camera, that's pretty much the best you can do with a static camera. Static meaning that you manually have to turn it and whatnot to see something different, where a not static, a non-static would be where you can control it remotely and get it to turn. So from here you can set the trigger range on how much of the screen needs to change before you get alert. So like right here, or pretty much say anything, and so on. You can just change the numbers, and anything between this, so you can change it here too. And basically anything between there, the green line on here, if it hits anywhere in that, it triggers it. So basically, if you're supposed to have constant movement, then you can move this, and you can see that as your production line stopped or whatnot. That's the only advantage to having a detection towards when things are not moving. So from here you can do the color filtering. I'm not a huge fan of this, but I've heard what you can do is take a thermal camera, and if you're looking for sick people, you can end up just messing with the color, and you can actually make it where it only looks for sick people. And that way, if you have a sick person walking anywhere near on the camera, then pretty much what's going to happen is you're going to get alert, because sick people run hotter, so therefore we can detect them. So that's pretty much that. I'm pretty sure there's other examples, but for the most part there's that. I suggest selecting the suppress noise, and this basically doesn't really look at a static. So from here we got display styles, you got grid, and basically it's that. You got object tracking, and it's that, which I highly advise more so than anything else. You got border, which is let's let it move around a little bit. You can see it's that. You got area, and let's let it move around a little bit more. And basically it just, instead of just doing a border, it covers up the area. And none. I suggest object, because what happens with the grid is it blocks out an actual grid. If you do the border, then it actually blocks out a little too much. So if you're trying to figure out who stole something, then you can actually mess yourself over by using the border or area highlights. Object tracking, the middle of it basically puts a box outside of the person or area. Now keep in mind, it basically looks at one frame, then looks at the next, and from there, if the 2 frames are different, it just says these things are objects. So it could be multiple things. Basically it says part of person's hand is an object, then the part of the person's arm is an object. It's just how the software looks at things. So you're not going to get a huge box around a person. You're probably going to get multiple boxes, but it's easier to deal with. And for this, I suggest selecting keep edges and highlights, and experiment with the minimum width and height and the color that you want. But the frames, I suggest keeping on 1 and keeping this auto off to 0, because basically what that does is it turns off the thing after a couple seconds. And try to show you real quick. Basically does that. So it basically turns the connection between your whatever you want to call it, your camera to your computer. The camera will still be on, but the connection will be lost for that short time. Now, how do you select the areas? Basically, what you do is you, if you don't have anything selected, then it looks at the whole picture. If you wanted to look at a particular picture, say for example right here I got a weather sock, and it's too dark, right? But I have a whirligig right here somewhere, so I don't want them selected because that's going to trigger things, as you saw. So I select everything else, and what you do is just click and hold, and there you go. You can go to a corner and drag and resize, and if you want to get rid of it entirely, just click and let's drag it so you can see this, and just hold it and go off screen, and you can see, or you just take the whole thing off screen. and it deletes it. Simple as that. Now, for the alerts, that's basically, as you may guess, it just triggers alert. Let's see if we can get it to trigger one. Basically, what happens is what's supposed to happen here, and it sometimes works, sometimes doesn't on this particular camera, for how I have it set up. But for the most part, what's supposed to happen is if you got movement, then any movement at all, and let's push that all the way up, and you can see right here it turns red, saying, hey, there's alert. And I might even get alert down here if I'm not clicking on this. So give it a second or two, or not. But if you're not selected onto this, because I'm actually selected on there, if the alert started when I'm not on here, I'll get a notification. So that's pretty much that. Let's put it back. And by the again, I suggest doing 15 or 20 for the trigger range. But you can do movement, no movement, sub production line type of deal. Object count, which I highly advise. And overlay and face detection, I don't advise these. These are plugins. They kind of suck. But right here you can select your intervals. You can select what happens when you get alert, connection loss, reconnect, and pretty much all the selections are the same. But basically you can get it to beep or send a message or whatever. Now with the record, you can, I highly suggest doing record on alert, but you can do no record, record on motion, or record on alert. Now this is very important, because if you got a record on alert, then whatever type of alert that you have, if it goes off, it'll start recording. If you got record on motion, then any motion starts recording, and you're going to get your thing filled pretty fast. Now with this, I highly advise you have some type of delay and buffer. The reason for this is, if say for example I got something moving and it didn't detect it before it got in the middle of my frame, what happens is with that buffer, I basically added where if it took some time for, I don't know, Joe Blow to go from here to here, then, and it detected it right here, then this should be within the shot, given it's within that buffer, or a majority of that should be in that shot. So that's just something to keep in mind. I had some dogs that I actually came across, and I didn't know which way they came from because I didn't have that buffer. So that's an actual example. Now with here, the time lapse, this since it's an outdoor camera and it's not really a security camera, I have it like this, but I highly advise if you have your stuff connected to a Dropbox account or something like that, so you're going to a cloud automatically, what I highly advise you to do is select the time lapse enable. This will make it easier to view or find when something happened. And what I highly suggest is doing 15 and doing 60 and then doing 4, and that way every, let me undo these. But what that basically says is every so often take a picture. Every second, this is how many pictures need to be within there. So say for example, if I add that 15, every 15 seconds it'll take a picture. Since we would have a frame rate of 4, then we got basically a minute per second. So if you have that for 60, let's say every 60, basically every 60 minutes, which is an hour, you'll get a time lapse, which lasts for 1 minute. Try it out and see if that works for you. You can mess around with that, but that's something that you want to keep in mind. Now, if you want it to start at a particular time of day, do the schedule and select the time of day that you want it to start and stop. And as you see here, I got mine starting and stopping at midnight. So basically my 24-hour thing will be literally 24 hours from midnight to whenever. This uses the computer clock, by the way. Now, let's go into if your device moves. Basically, you need to select your type of device and go from there. Unfortunately, this one doesn't move, so I can't show you too much. But let's say your stuff moves. You need to put in your username, your password, and if your camera's not on here, you might want to check out all the different cameras to see if you can get it working. Some cameras that even move might not even work with the software for some reason, but for the most part I have pretty good success with a lot of my cameras. What you need to do is you need to set your presettings. So say for example I got a camera, I got one in my kitchen. I basically set it where it tracks objects. From there, it when it doesn't see an object for X amount of time, it actually goes and tries to center itself. When it centers itself, it goes to preset 1. It's very important to know that, because what happens is, depending on how your camera is set up, if you go off and look straight wherever the camera normally is when it's centered, you might see a fan, you might see a TV, you might see something that you don't want. So you have a preset, so you want your camera to look in this general area, or a preset so it sees the entrances and exits of a given area, which is very important. In fact, the most important that you can do. And so how do you get this to work? Basically, you need to, if you're tracking an object, you need to have the track object selected. Depending on the type of camera, you can go any direction, whatnot. I don't know why it would select reverse. I don't know the scenario at all. Basically, this means that if the object goes right, the camera goes left. Simple as that. I don't know why you would do that. But if you want your stuff to go back to preset 1 after every so often, what you do is just do auto center and then select preset 1. Simple as that. You might have to reset your stuff once in a while, but still you need to select whatever you want and select whatever time that you want. Now, I highly advise that every 6 hours or so do a centered, and depending on your camera, you might actually have to set it up to say you want to do the center. In fact, I actually programmed, I think it was this one, and you can see I can select it every midnight, center it, and I suggest after it's centered, go to preset 1 time it and figure out how long it takes to your camera, but about after 3 minutes of centering itself, go and go to preset 1. Sometimes they get stuck, sometimes it's whatever, so keep that one in mind. But sometimes you're not going to be able to do this because your camera is static, and that's very important. Now you can select the FTP servers and whatnot, the images and so on, but as far as the storage goes, I highly advise you to go and set your stuff up for Dropbox or Google Drive. That way, if someone comes up and steals your computer or whatever, then the stuff will be on the cloud and you don't have anything to worry about. You can set yourself for FTP server or whatnot if you want, but I don't see a purpose of that if you got it set up with something like Dropbox, unless your FTP server is really good. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, as far as this goes with the, let's go into floor plans real quick. To add floor plan, just basically go there and put in your floor plan, find the image, and you can make it in Paint, as you see here, and go from there. If you want to mess around with it, basically, you just click and add a camera, use Shift key and hold it down to change the direction of the camera and just move it wherever. Let's remove the camera, and there you go. So as far as this goes, let's get into the settings for the actual how to store the stuff and manage the storage. As you see here, I pretty much didn't mess with all this, but what you need to do is select wherever you want to store it. And here's what I advise. Select how many gigabytes that you want the stuff to be at max. Have your stuff delete something that's so old if 70% of your stuff's full. So basically, when it's about 7 gigabytes of information, anything 5 days or older will be deleted. Simple as that. I can select it higher or lower or whatnot. I would not suggest archive. It's just simple as that. But select whatever you want as far as the size, and there you go. That way, if you got a Dropbox account now and it holds a gigabyte, you don't have a gigabyte or over a gigabyte trying to upload. You can, if you have a Dropbox account that holds 100 gigabytes, you can have it go up to that or whatever. It's up to you. And that way your computer doesn't get overloaded with memory. Now, as far as the rest of this, I'm pretty much going to say that it's somewhat easy to deal with. I highly advise you to go out and check out the auto layouts and do the optimize. I'm not going to do that because I'm hiding a lot of my cameras right now, but I suggest you to do that if you got multiple cameras and floor plans and whatnot. But for the most part, this is pretty much it. Oh, and for the time lapse, that's pretty much a time lapse, and that's whatever you saw. I forgot how long. I think it's every 10 minutes or every 5 minutes. So you can see where we're screwing around right there, and you can see this is the actual recording. So yeah. Now, again, if you got any questions or whatnot, I highly suggest you leave them on iSpy forums, but you can also leave them on this video, and I'll try to answer as quickly as possible. Now, this has been Craig Bennett, founder and owner of TechViewsNup, and if you like this video, then please like, please subscribe, and please share, and help me out that way, and I hope you have a great day.